Daniel Judd is on the line with us. He's a contributor to The Nation magazine, where he's reporting a three-part series on climate justice. His most recent, Australia is Burning, is the cover story for the February 10th issue of The Nation magazine. You can also find it online at thenation.com. And Daniel, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. In your article, you point out that Australia was once positioned to be a leader in climate change. Now we've got, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, who denies climate change. You've got a majority of his party denying climate change, and you've got this woman who's a coal baron and the richest person in Australia funding many of these politicians, as well as, right-wing think tanks that deny climate change. What happened to Australia?
Yeah, what happened to Australia? It's a great question. And I think it's an important one to ask now as we consider the next decade of climate action, which the international scientists for the UN have told us is going to be the most important decade yet.
Yeah, because Australia might be coming to a town near you here any day now.
Exactly. And I think to understand what happened to Australia, you have to go back to 2007, which was really the key moment here. So in 2007, according to a poll by one of Australia's think tanks, 68% of Australians thought that climate change was an urgent issue that required immediate action, even if there were costs for that action. And as a result, there was a push in politics from both sides. The Labour Party, which is on the left, and the Liberal Party, which is the Australian Conservative Party, to bring a kind of carbon tax, effectively, into Australian politics. That fell apart in 2007. And since then, it's been downhill for the Liberal Party, which has become the party of climate denial, seized on the mantle of becoming the party of coal, which is a huge dynamic in Australian politics, even more than it is in American. And just to give you a sense of how profound the shift was, in 2012, that same poll found that only 36% of Australians thought that climate change was urgent and required immediate action. So it's really been, since 2007, a rapid decline in the country's ability to lead on climate policy. Coal is, I believe, the
principal export of Australia, isn't it? Or certainly among the top 5.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So,
and they're also.
I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
They're also, sorry, just to jump in, Tom. They're also the leading exporter of coal in the world as of 2018, and also the leading exporter of natural gas.
Wow. So, what role? Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, wrote an op-ed in the Sydney Morning Herald last year, and the title, the headline, kind of tells the whole thing. Rupert Murdoch is the cancer at the heart of Australian politics. That was the headline, and he talks about how Murdoch and his newspapers. He owns more than half the newspapers in Australia, both in absolute numbers and by circulation, as I recall, and that Murdoch's papers, basically, or Murdoch himself, basically kneecapped the left, or for that matter, the middle in Australia. And then he moved to the United Kingdom, and he did the same thing there, with Maggie Thatcher and everything that followed. And then he moved to the United States and created Fox News in I believe it was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and did the same thing to us. To what extent is this change in public opinion in Australia about the significance and horrors of global climate change and the need to act on it? You said it's gone from 2/3 support down to 1/3 support. Roughly, to what extent is that attributable to this one cranky old billionaire?
Well, I should add that since 2012, that number that I was citing has gone closer back up to 60%. Okay. So there is some hope that maybe the direction is turning now.
Presumably because of the wildfires.
Right. Murdoch, presumably because of the wildfires, exactly. And Australia is on the front lines of climate change right now. Right. And everyone I talked to while I was there reporting this story knows that whether they relate it to climate change or not, this is different. And they've never seen anything like this before. That was absolutely universal. And that's something that even Murdoch's papers have trouble combating. So what they've done instead is shift to a different kind of climate denial. And this is something that Scott Morrison has done as well. Rather than claim that climate change doesn't exist or isn't causing these fires, they're doing two other things. First, they're claiming in Murdoch's papers and in the Liberal Party that climate change is happening, it is man-made, but it's not Australia's men and women who are making it. So Morrison will give you the statistics very often that 1.3% of the world's emissions are Australia's. So how can it possibly be their fault? And that obscures the fact that per capita, the country is one of the highest emitters in the world. And the second thing that they're doing is they are retroactively claiming that that Australia has in fact acted on climate politics and doesn't need to act anymore. And to do that, they're citing some statistics from their pledges to international climate agreements like the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement that make it seem as though they're actually meeting their commitments to reduce emissions, when in reality, in the raw data, those emissions continue to go up. So one could say they're basically cooking the books.
Yeah, which doesn't surprise probably anybody, but it's really tragic. You said that public opinion is now back up above 50 or even 60% in favor of doing, or in favor of at least acknowledging climate change. Do you see, particularly given the ferocity of the wildfires that we've seen just in the last few months, I don't know if polls have been done in the last few weeks that would reflect any change in public opinion, but do you see the possibility that the Liberal Party, which is the Conservative Party in Australia, they use the word liberal the way Europeans do to mean basically libertarian, that the Liberal Party, right, the Conservative Liberal Party in Australia might have an epiphany and decide to start ignoring their big fossil fuel donors, particularly this coal baron?
It's a good question, and it's one that everyone in Australia is asking right now. I think we are a long way from seeing change in the Liberal Party on anything but the level of rhetoric. So, to give you an example, I talked in Australia to a lot of former fire chiefs. These are people who have been on the front lines of fighting fires for decades in Australia. In some case, up to 40, 45 years of their life spent fighting fires. They have tried, as a group, over the past 8 months to meet with the Morrison government to try and form an emergency council around bushfires, not even to push for more climate action, but just to figure out how to better prepare for the reality that this will be the summer Australia lives with in the years to come. Morrison has refused to meet with them. And I think that whatever rhetoric comes forward in the next few months, ultimately, this is an issue that the Liberal Party seems to have decided, like the Republicans in the United States, is going to be the issue that they will go down fighting on. And as far as change is concerned, it's going to have to come from activism, from work on the left in Australian politics, and from winning the next election.